if you look at the last 5 years, it's not that government has spent less on capex. All the capex that's happening in the economy is basically the government of India capex.
Sure.
So be it roads, be it railways, be it whatever. I mean, you take whatever. It's not the private sector which is spending. So the issue simply is that can you get some spending going on either from the household or the private sector? I mean, one area could be housing, for example. You sort of took out the benefit of a second home investment. Now, the fact is, you borrow at 9, give to for rent for 3%, a 6% negative carry. Why would anybody do it? It's a sort of public service, I would think, especially if the real estate prices are not going up. Definitely public service. But if you cut down the tax benefit, why would I have any incentive to buy a house and give it to somebody who? So that has been a huge sort of stress. They can do something about that. They could address the liquidity issues in some sense because we've had a problem in NBFC sector. It's a huge impact. That can be, if that can be addressed in some fashion or the other. I think the fact is that the corporate India has faced ever higher taxes. So tax on risk capital in India is very high. Your effective tax rate of corporate India has gone up a lot over a period of last 5-10 years. While you've taken out exemption, you sort of not lower tax rate for bulk of, at least size of corporate India. Plus you got more dividend tax, you got capital gains tax, you got all sorts of taxes happening on risk capital. They have to address that because if you sort of keep raising taxes, you might not have enough growth to actually tax it. I mean, if you've taken out the exemption on second house, if nobody invests in second house, you'll not get any tax anyways, but you'll also not get the activity. Therefore, extra cement that you've got tax on is also not going to happen to you. So when you cause a slowdown by such measures, you actually have counterproductive impact. So you've got to get capital flowing into assets instead of consumption. Or instead of going to just banks and lying there.
So there is talk that SME could be an area of focus for the government because not only does it have a large job creation, it also is kind of the real economy is the wider economy in a broad sense. Do you think they can incentivize for tax incentives for promoters and entrepreneurs who are going to plan capex? Because that area just got choked of liquidity last several months. How deep is the worry or the concern in the broader economy in your view?
So I think
and hence they should address
choking has happened because of the fact that, I think NBFC crisis is part example of it. I mean, while the housing finance companies might have been taking the brunt of it, but the flow of credit generally to NBFC sector has stopped. And real small SMEs, I think for larger banks, it's very hard to credit flow is very difficult. So I think a lot of credit flow is happening through NBFCs. And government cannot direct that credit flow. I mean, the fact of the matter is, why is SME not getting credit? Because the people who are able to take that credit decision and give them have gone out of the system. Banks are not in a position to do that, I mean, I would say on a broad basis, because their economics doesn't work, for example, or their credit quality, or their credit weaker. So the thing is that if you don't fix this issue, just by sort of making some statement, I'm giving a 2% subsidy on interest rate, is not going to make any difference because the actual decision to give credit was essentially in a particular sector, which essentially is just not lending right now.
But affordable housing is doing well. At least the volume growth at the cement companies, and we speak to them, show that in the tier 2, tier 3 side, affordable housing is doing relatively better.
But who's dispersing the credit? Who's dispersing that credit? Private companies. The point is that the credit decision there is easier for banks because collateralized. When you do SME lending or small, it's not collateralized. So housing with the lower risk rates, with the fact that your 2.5 lakhs rupees, let's say on a 20 lakh rupee house, is already fronted, right? So your risk has reduced to that extent because you got that subsidy, affordable housing subsidy already. Much easier decision to make.
Let's talk about the rural distress which is being spoken about. Water, of course, is an issue, but the way tractor sales month after month is lower. We were speaking to Mr. Parthasarathy of M&M a few days back, and we couldn't really get a clear outlook from him, as if a couple of months also look hazy. How are you analyzing the rural part of the country, tier 2, tier 3, where slowdown is hit, job?
I would think a lot is to do with...
And what can they do there?
It is not only rural distress. I think the kind of slowdown we have seen all of a sudden, I think if you really look at where it started, just before the NBFC crisis, tractors were doing absolutely fine. So I think, agriculture is not agriculture is a small part of rural economy. It's not. There's a lot more actually. And actually, in fact, the pure agriculture is smaller than a non-agri economy. And the informal credit and the credit there, I think the choking actually would probably have a disproportionate impact on rural economy than urban economy, because the regular banking channels, etc., don't operate in those areas.
So higher allocation in rural, do you think, can do the trick?
I don't think it's that easy. I mean, the fact of the matter is you're giving a pension of 6,000 rupees to farmers. What has happened? Nothing. MSPs have been raised. What has happened? The fact is that the choking of credit itself is having an impact, I think.
Urea, DBT to urea perhaps could save, on the one hand, a lot of money for government.
The question is, we have a 75,000 crore subsidy on fertilizers. Can we raise it? And if you're giving 6,000 rupees to a farmer and that is not raising it, 70,000 crores, if that is not changing, I mean, if you look at the fertilizer subsidy of 75,000 crores, I mean, how would it change? Will it go to 85,000 crores? Will it go to 65? If it goes to 65, you're less stimulus.
Sure.
So the point is, you look at the concept of spending money. The whole thing is that this giving 70,000 crores extra to rural India has not helped. And that is because of the fact that the flow of credit, I think, in non-agri activity has been a huge problem.
So you also interact with some of the top FIs across the world. What are their expectations? What would they like to see this budget in commentary and action as well?
So I think it's question approach, right? So I think the fact of the matter is that in reality, in the last term, if you really look at what we got with an expectation of a pickup in economy, especially led by private sector, but a number of reforms which were disruptive in nature. I mean, take RERA, for example, or take GST, or take bankruptcy bill. They actually caused a slowdown. Because by the nature of the fact that you're trying to clean up a whole system, it will slow down the economy. Then you've got NBFC crisis on top. So there has been generally, most of the reforms have been slowdown inducing. I think we got to move past into sort of growth related reforms first. And whether it is done through a tax mechanism or through outside mechanism. But the point is, I think investors pay for growth. And if they don't see, and the good thing is, thankfully for India, the globe has slowed down. So even in our slowdown situation, India doesn't look that badly off. Otherwise, it would have been really bad. We would have had really bad markets. But and the fact is that there is a broad market which is very weak as it is, right? So I think the focus on growth in terms of philosophy, in terms of the fact that you want the private sector capex to take off, so give them incentives in a way which sort of stimulates them to take that kind of risk. And also give a roadmap of what else comes. Because I think budget is too soon after the elections. And if the government is focused on growth, they won't be able to achieve everything in the budget. Sure. It is, end of the day, state-owned finances, but various ministries can do a lot more stuff. And the private sector doesn't get money from this. They get excited by opportunities. Sure. So the whole opening up, in fact, in 2001 of road sector didn't happen in the budget. But it happened sort of outside. So I think that is, but a roadmap and a hint of what is to come in terms of approach, how they're approaching this whole economy in the next 5 years, will probably be watched for. Whether it'll be delivered or not, I don't know.
In fact, you're also one of the. I remember talking to you when you had called, the current government coming back in leadership also pretty accurately. So how do you analyze or expect the second term of Modi leadership versus the first term, their focus areas in the first term, and the way their commentary was, their manifesto was, the way things are panning out? What are your expectations the way the second term could pan out?
So that makes me hopeful, actually, because if you really look at the first term manifesto, there was no GDP target. There was no target of $5 trillion economy. It was more about corruption. It was more about sort of system. So I think they really didn't promise that much on growth, which in this manifesto, there are clear spelled out objectives in terms of how much they want to invest in infrastructure, what kind of GDP they want, sort of targets. And if you go back and see the last manifesto, a lot of what they said was something that they acted on. So I'm sort of hoping that they will focus a lot more on growth this term, because the system cleanup that they were focusing on has already happened. I mean, so that is one part. And secondly, I think from this government's perspective, I think you cannot not have growth and hope to get elected the next term. The people always give you a second chance, but if the kind of demographics change that we're going to see, and so many young people who are going to come into the working age population, they don't get jobs because there's no growth. I think there'll be far more discontent, 5 years down the line. So I think government politically also will be compelled to actually look at growth compared to just cleaning up the system.